What was the scariest we need to leave now gut feeling that you've ever experienced? My brother and I were kids, playing hide and seek in the front yard of our house. My brother was 3, and I was 6. My brother was supposed to be counting and finding me, but he was taking forever, so I peeked around the side of the house to see what was taking so long. He had lost interest in the game and was standing near the front gate, which led to the street. As I'm looking, I see a brown car pull up with 2 men inside. The car wasn't familiar, and neither were the men. They both got out of the car and approached my brother. They started asking him questions and moving closer to him. I remember feeling panicked. I had learned about stranger danger in school and knew this wasn't right. I ran around the side of the house, flew through the back door, and screamed, "Someone is trying to kidnap Steve." My dad didn't hesitate. He got up and flew through the front door. When the men saw my dad coming through the door, they bolted and peeled out. From that day forward, we weren't allowed to play in the front yard anymore. It's a really scary memory for me. I had a similar experience as a kid, but it was my cousin who saved me. We had a lemonade stand set up at the end of our driveway. I was maybe 3, but my cousin was in her teens and my older brother was also with us. Some weird dude stopped for lemonade. He seemed friendly but made a weird comment about seeing the engine in his car and tried to get me to come to his car door. My cousin picked me up and ran us right back to the house and my mom. Ironically enough, I lived in a small town and my mom was actually having coffee with one of the local police officers in her home. The guy peeled off before we even got down the driveway, but he definitely picked the wrong house that day. When I was 18, some strange couple wanted me to look at their car because supposedly the accelerator wasn't working. I asked them to pop the hood and check the linkage. All seemed good. The guy which was in the driver's seat kept asking me to go for a test drive with me as passenger. I told him he could get out and I would feel the accelerator myself. He denied, so I just left. I highly suspect they were up to no good, but I cannot confirm. I was at a family gathering, basically a reunion, but just for family within reasonable driving distance. Probably 30 people all together. It was at County Park on a small lake with some grills and buildings. Just an empty hall with some picnic tables inside. You could rent for this kind of stuff. The sky started darkening as a storm was approaching. All the coolers, chairs, balls, and other kids' toys, etc. were brought into the building anticipating the rain. The plan was to wait it out since afternoon showers are common just about every day in the summer. Something in the air didn't feel or smell right, even though it appeared to be just a regular afternoon storm. Hair on my neck was standing up and I was in full flight mode. Can't really describe it. The feeling in the pit of my stomach can only be described as absolute dread. I told my wife to take my daughter and get in the car. My brother-in-law took one look at my face and said, "What's wrong?" Apparently, I was white as a ghost. It wasn't even raining yet and I was full on panic, yelling for everyone to leave. Something isn't right. No one else was that worried, mostly concerned with how I was acting. I went up to the car, and as soon as I was about to turn the key, the tornado sirens went off. We were not far from wherever they put those, or they're just stupidly loud, because it was deafeningly loud. Now the rest of the family is pouring out of the building to their cars, kids crying, and I look across the lake maybe a few miles in the distance and see a funnel cloud. Got the hell out of there, as did everyone else. The building we had rented for this family barbecue thing was completely annihilated, literally just a slab of concrete and a shit ton of debris all around. It was hit dead on by an EF3. There's something about the air before a tornado. I had a similar experience when I was in HS, babysitting 2 young girls. We were in their living room playing next to a big picture window, and I remember looking outside, noticing how it suddenly became very dark and still. I moved them to the other room without windows so they wouldn't get worried. 5 minutes later, my mom texted to make sure we were inside. The sirens were going off in her hometown, about 20 miles away. It was being obliterated. 200-year-old brick churches torn in half. Thankfully, all the damage was material. My car was stolen the very night I moved into my new house in a very good neighborhood. The neighbors had warned us that the neighborhood was being targeted at the time. They mentioned a woman around the corner that opened the door for knockers in the middle of the night and they attacked her and robbed her and almost killed her. We had reported the car stolen and did the police reports when it happened. Well, 2 nights later in the middle of the night, I hear a knock on the door and they said, "Open up, it's the police." Well, since I had heard the story about the other lady, I was suspicious and did not answer. I grabbed my kids and put them in my daughter's room because it had access to the roof from the window. I called the police to say that 2 men claiming to be police are pounding on my door. They said there was no police in the area and they're sending a car. Turns out, these same guys stole the car and came back for seconds. I did get my car back because they brought it with. They came back to rob your house in your car, then claim to be cops? I love when criminals are absolute morons. Unfortunately, absolute morons are the most dangerous people. My little brother and I were tossing a baseball around near dusk at the bottom of our property. 30 wooded mountain acres way in the middle of nowhere. It had gotten dark enough that we were just about to call it quits when we heard the single most horrifying scream we've ever heard coming from the trees just beyond the edge of the clearing. Imagine a woman screaming in mortal agony, writhing in the most wretched torment imaginable, every tortured scream from horror movies, war movies, anything you've ever heard, nothing compared to this. Even now, decades removed from hearing it, the hair on my arms and neck stands up just thinking of it, and it's made even worse by the realization of what it actually was. A mountain lion. Full-grown female mountain lions scream loudly when they're in heat, and it sounds like a human woman being torn to pieces by the devil himself. To hear that, 2 kids alone in the dark, in the middle of nowhere, was about as terrifying as it gets. I grabbed his arm and ran, scrambled, fear levitated up the hill faster than ever before or since. It's been 25 years, and I still haven't fully unpuckered. This is a good example of the kind of sound from a trail cam video. Make sure to play loudly in the dark, lol. I was freshly married in my early 20s, living in Fallbrook, California. My husband, X, was a Marine and was at work, and I was driving home from visiting family further south. In order to get into Fallbrook, you have to travel along this long, dark, and windy street called Mission Road. It's already a super dark night, about 11 p.m., and it's a little foggy as well. I'm slowing down and coming around this slight bend in the road, and all of a sudden the hair goes up on my neck, and I feel incredibly anxious. About 5 seconds later, a young woman jumps out of the brush directly ahead of me, maybe 50 feet away, on the left-hand side of the road, while waving her arms in the air and gesturing frantically for me to pull over. I swerved a bit to the right, slowing down even further, but I did not stop. She was young, maybe early 20s or even late teens, and a little dirty, and I was immediately conflicted over continuing to drive. But something told me not to stop under any circumstances. I got further up the road, slowed a little more, and dialed 911 with one shaky hand. The dispatcher said she'd send someone to check, but encouraged me not to feel badly. Apparently, there had already been calls about this girl over the last hour, and they were unable to find her when police followed up. I heard a few weeks later about some carjacking/robbery attempts in the area. Very relieved, I listened to my instincts that nig. Doesn't I need to go home now feeling count? And it wasn't me, but my mom. Anyway, I was around 12 or so and my mom left to run an errand, leaving me alone. Very soon after she left, the doorbell rang. This was weird because we lived on a hill with only 2 neighbors, we all kept to ourselves, and we just didn't get random visitors. Thanks to some conveniently placed picture frames, I could see out the door without being seen. I look out and see a young man I don't recognize. He's dressed in a t-shirt and jeans, and something just feels off. So I ignore him and wait for him to leave. But he doesn't. He lingers and starts smoking. Again, this is an isolated hill, I'm alone, and now I'm getting scared. I go and hide and plan to wait for my mom, except she just left, had a few errands to run, and I couldn't reach the phone without the guy seeing me. As I'm trying to figure out what to do, my mom comes home. She runs in and asks if I'm okay. Apparently, she got this random go home now urge. She hadn't even run her first errand yet, but turned around immediately, found the guy in our yard and asked what he needed. I guess he muttered something about looking for someone, or something to that effect, and my mom told him to leave. Apparently, he was acting very strangely and made my mom nervous. To this day, I have no idea what he wanted, and no idea how my mom knew to come home. But I am very grateful she did. When I was around 9 or 10, my mom took me with her on a business trip to a nearby city. This is before smartphones, when you still had to MapQuest stuff. We were supposed to meet my mom's friend/coworker at the mall for something. Since her friend had given her directions, we didn't bother going down to the hotel computer to print directions. I think there was maybe one there. This was around 2000 to 2001. We got lost and ended up pulling into a small storage unit place to pull out a map. It was just 2 rectangular buildings, maybe a total of like 20 units. I don't remember why, exactly, but I was really scared and kept crying and asking if we could just go back to the hotel. I assumed she got fed up with her kid crying in the passenger seat and she couldn't quite figure out where we were, so we went back to the hotel. The next day, they found the bodies of 2 teenagers in one of the units we pulled in front of. I don't believe in spirits or ghosts, but something similar happened to me. I was on a snorkeling day trip in Vanuatu and we were taken to various locations by the tour guides. It was all lots of fun. One of the stops later in the day was an island called Head Island, where I felt this weird ominous energy. There was nothing strange looking on the island. It just felt weird, like an invisible bad force surrounding us. It wasn't threatening, but it felt tense and dark and sort of urgent. I remarked on it to my mother, and she agreed. I don't usually notice energy or karma. I'm not a mystical person. so this was really weird. Some years later, I was watching a documentary and learned that this island was the burial site of a legendary chief. Even worse, all of his wives and his entourage were buried along with him alive. We're talking possibly hundreds of people. Apparently this site is well known for this, but we had no idea at the time because we were just there in a boat to snorkel. I'm a rational, scientific sort of person, but this experience really challenged my thinking. Wednesday midday run along a beautiful river pathway near my apartment block. About 1 kilometer and I felt people watching me and directly turned around and ran home, even though I did not see anybody. Closed the 2 magnetic gates leading up to my door and didn't see anybody around or follow me. About 10 minutes later, 2 guys were at my front door trying to push it in. I was luckily on the other side of the door at that moment and pushed it back closed with all my force and began screaming. I managed to security lock the front door and text my apartment block for help. I was on the 2nd floor, and they obviously watched which apartment I went into. Looking back at the apartment's security cameras, they were able to see the 2 guys pull apart the magnetic security gates, 2 of them. The block then quickly changed the gates to a mechanic lock that cannot be pulled apart. I was at the state fair with my mom and my best friend. Friend and I were looking at the rides and the games. This creepy guy ABD, his blonde girlfriend, kept babbling at us about taking headshots and that he was a modeling agent. He just seemed off and really sleazy, and the girl was giving me the creeps, so I pretended that I saw my mom telling us to come and grabbed my friend and dragged her off. She was close to 5 feet 8 inches and not a small girl, 13 years old. I was 4 feet 9 inches and around 65 pounds at 14 years old. A few days later, there's a news story and rumors going around the school about 2 girls being kidnapped, assaulted, and murdered. They were taken from the fair the same day we were there. Just few hours later, the creepy couple were Gerald and Charlene Gallegos, serial killers. Insane that she's just out free now, and has been since 1997. She claims to be a victim too. That's the wildest part for me. I bartended, and years ago I kicked this guy out because he was acting very strange, muttering under his breath that he would kill my other customers, just really hostile. He had missing fingers on one hand and he was kind of a bigger guy. After bar closed, I was almost finished counting money, so like an hour after everyone left, and I was just about to leave and I had that gut feeling. I looked out the window and that guy was standing on the corner watching me in a ski mask. I know it was him because of the build. As soon as I grabbed my phone, he took off, but the cops know who he is. Now he has a vendetta out against me and he's well known around town. He's fucking nuts. If you want more stories like this, subscribe to the channel, click, and also let me know about it in the comments. Thanks for watching.